Before I share the painful details of my story, I have a quick question for you. Where in the world are you watching this from right now, and what time is it over there? Drop it in the comments below. I absolutely love seeing where my global family is tuning in from. It gives me so much strength. Go ahead and type your city and time right now, because what you're about to hear next will completely shock you. My name is Debra. I am 28 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I was treated like a ghost in my own family. Unless, of course, they needed a check written. I used to think that if I worked harder, if I became smarter, if I sacrificed more, they would finally look at me with the same pride they reserved for my older brother Preston. But in the city of Austin, Texas, where the summers are scorching and the tech boom makes people dizzy with greed, I learned the hardest lesson of my life. Some people don't want your love. They just want to drain you dry like an oil well. Growing up in the shadows of our cramped suburban home, I was the daughter who kept her head down. I was the one who cleaned the kitchen while my mother, Meredith, rubbed Preston's shoulders because he was stressed from failing another high school algebra test. My father, Pierce, a man whose anger always simmered just beneath his skin like a broken thermostat, made it clear very early on that Preston was the family legacy. Preston was the golden child. I was just the extra mouth to feed the girl who was expected to eventually marry someone, disappear, and stop taking up space. But I didn't disappear. I possessed a burning, quiet ambition that terrified them. While snorts. Preston spent his 20s crashing cheap used cars that my parents bought him with credit card debt. I was staying up until 3 o'clock in the morning under a single desk lamp. I didn't have a safety net. I didn't have a trust fund. I had a brain, a fierce sense of self-preservation, and an absolute refusal to let my family's mediocrity drag me down into the dirt. For years, I played my part perfectly. I was the beautiful, quiet daughter who tolerated the gaslighting. I listened to my mother tell me that my achievements didn't matter because a woman's true place is serving her family. I watched my father roll his eyes whenever I brought home a straight A report card while he threw a backyard barbecue because Preston managed to keep a part-time job at a pizza place for 3 consecutive weeks. I accepted it because I genuinely believed, with the naive innocence of a neglected child, that one day they would wake up and realize how much I loved them. I thought my success would be the key that finally opened their hearts. I had no idea that my success was actually the very thing that would make them view me as a target. To understand the sheer magnitude of what they did, you have to understand exactly what I went through to build the life they tried to steal. When I turned 18, Pierce and Meredith made it very clear that they wouldn't be contributing a single dime to my education. They told me that college was a luxury for girls and that any spare money the family had needed to be saved for Preston's future business ventures. So I did what I always did. I took control of my own destiny. I worked a grueling night shift at a local tech support firm in Austin, answering calls from angry customers until 4 in the morning, and then I would drag my exhausted body to morning classes at the University of Texas. I didn't sleep for 4 years. I survived on cheap black coffee, instant ramen, and sheer willpower. I maintained a flawless 4.00 GPA, which secured me a full academic scholarship that covered my tuition but every other expense. My books, my cheap rent, my food came directly out of my own pocket. But my independence didn't sit well with my parents. The moment they realized I was making steady money from my night job, the financial vampire fangs came out. Meredith would call me crying, claiming that the utility bills were overdue or that Pierce's truck needed a new transmission. Every single month, like clockwork, they demanded $1,500 from my meager earnings. If I hesitated, PICE would scream at me over the phone, calling me an ungrateful, selfish brat who forgot the family that raised her. I paid it. I handed over thousands of dollars while Preston sat on the living room couch, 30 years old, playing video games, smoking cigarettes, and driving a used sedan that my parents had bought him by maxing out their credit cards. I was literally funding my brother's lazy, parasitic lifestyle while I walked 2 miles to campus in the freezing rain because I couldn't afford a bus pass. My breaking point should have been years ago, but instead, I kept pushing. After graduation, my hard work finally paid off in a massive way. I was hired as a senior software architect for a major tech firm in downtown Austin. Within a couple of years, my salary skyrocketed into 6 figures. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. I could finally breathe. And to celebrate the fact that I had pulled myself out of the financial gutter entirely on my own, I bought my absolute dream car. It was a custom metallic blue BMW sedan. Total cost, $85,000, fully paid off in cash. The day I drove that car off the lot, I cried. It wasn't just a vehicle to me. It was a rolling monument to my sweat, my tears, and my ultimate freedom. It was during this time that I met Ethan. Ethan was everything my family wasn't. Supportive, fiercely protective, and deeply loving. We got married 2 years ago in a small, elegant ceremony that my parents barely smiled through. From day one, Ethan saw right through them. He watched how Meredith would inspect my clothes and jewelry with envy, and how Pierce would only talk to me when he wanted a loan that he never intended to pay back. Ethan begged me time and time again to cut ties with them. "Debra, they don't love you. They love your bank account," he would tell me, holding my hand. But I stubbornly held on. I thought that now that I was successful, now that I was married to a good man, they would finally respect me. I was so desperate for their validation that I kept walking right back into the lion's den, completely blind to the fact that they were just waiting for the perfect moment to tear my life apart. The trap was sprung 3 months ago when Preston announced his engagement to Chloe. Chloe was a hyper-materialistic woman from an influential family in West Austin, and Preston, who was still working a dead-end job and drowning in debt, was desperate to look like a high-rolling success story in front of her snobbish parents. A week before their formal engagement party, Preston called me. His tone was uncharacteristically sweet, dripping with a fake sibling affection that made my stomach churn. "Hey, big sis," he said. "Chloe's parents are flying in, and we're doing some high-end wedding shopping this weekend. Can I please borrow your BMW just for 3 days? I really need to make a good impression. You're my sister. You wouldn't want me to look bad, right?" I hesitated. I hated the idea of anyone driving my car, especially Preston, who had a track record of wrecking everything he touched. But then Meredith called me, weeping into the receiver, guilt-tripping me like she always did. "Debra, this is your brother's big chance to marry into a good family. Don't be so petty and selfish over a piece of metal. Support your brother for once." Wanting to avoid the inevitable family drama and foolishly hoping this small favor might finally earn me some peace, I reluctantly handed over the keys. I told him strictly, 3 days, Preston, I want it back at the engagement party. Fast forward to the night of the party. It was held at a lavish, high-end event hall in downtown Austin. By this time, I was 8 months pregnant. My body was heavy, my feet were swollen, and I was utterly exhausted. My husband, Ethan, couldn't arrive with me because he was trapped in an emergency corporate board meeting across town, but he promised to join me the second it wrapped up. I waddled into that glittering ballroom alone, wearing a maternity dress, feeling out of place, but genuinely trying to be happy for my brother. As the night wore on, the loud music and the heavy heat of the room started making me dizzy. I felt a sharp, dull ache in my lower back and realized I needed to go home and rest. I spotted Preston standing near the grand ice sculpture, surrounded by Chloe, her wealthy parents, and a dozen of their high society friends. I walked up to him, keeping a polite smile on my face. "Hey, Preston. Congratulations again. Listen, I'm feeling really tired, so I'm going to head out. Can I get my BMW keys back?" Preston's smile instantly vanished. He looked at me, then at Chloe's parents, and a dark, arrogant expression crossed his face. He chuckled loudly, ensuring the entire group could hear him. "What are you talking about, Debra? Your car? You mean the metallic blue BMW outside?" "Yes," I said, my voice dropping, realizing something was deeply wrong. "My car? The keys you borrowed?" Preston scoffed, rolling his eyes dramatically. "Debra, stop playing games. You know, Mom and Dad gave that car to me for my engineering graduation years ago. I didn't borrow anything." In fact, just an hour ago, I officially handed those keys to Chloe. It's my engagement gift to my beautiful fiancé. Chloe proudly held up her hand, dangling my custom key fob, a malicious smirk plastered on her face. My blood went cold. The room began to spin. Are you insane? I gasped, my voice rising in panic. I bought that car with my own cash. It's registered in my name. Give me my keys right now. Before Preston could answer, Pierce and Meredith materialized out of the crowd, grabbing my arms roughly and pulling me into a darker corner of the hall. Pierce's eyes were bloodshot with rage, his grip bruising my skin. "Shut your mouth, Debra," he hissed. "You are not going to ruin your brother's night with your psycho jealousy." We told Chloe's family that Preston is a partner at a tech firm. He needs that car for his image. You're rich. You can just buy another one. He stole from me. I screamed, tears finally bursting from my eyes as I tried to pull away from my father's grip. "You all stole from me. I am calling the police." Preston stepped forward, whispering into Pierce's ear with a venomous smirk. "Dad, she's going to call the cops and ruin everything." She told Chloe's dad that we're all frauds. She's destroying my life. Hearing this, Pice completely lost his mind. My father's face contorted into something monstrous. He didn't care that I was his daughter. He didn't care that I'd funded their lives for a decade. And most horrifyingly, he didn't care that I was visibly heavily pregnant. He looked around wildly, his rage blinding him to reality. Right next to us, a professional videographer had set up a heavy, black, industrial metal camera tripod to capture the party. Before anyone could realize what he was doing, Pierce lunged forward and ripped the heavy metal tripod right out of the videographer's hands. "You ungrateful beat! You ruin everything!" Pierce roared. He swung the heavy metal structure with full, unbridled force. I didn't even have time to raise my arms to protect myself. The metal legs of the tripod struck the side of my head with a sickening, heavy thud. The force of the blow shattered my glasses and split the skin on my forehead wide open. The world turned into a blur of blinding pain and white noise. I stumbled backward, completely losing my balance. As I collapsed toward the floor, my heavy 8-month pregnant belly smashed directly into the sharp, solid oak corner of a nearby banquet table. A white, hot, agonizing blade of pain ripped through my entire abdomen. I hit the polished floor hard, my hands instantly flying to my stomach. "My baby!" I gasped, but the words were choked out by a scream of pure, primitive agony. The physical trauma had instantly shocked my body into severe, violent, premature labor. Contractions hit me like a tidal wave, tearing through my lower back and pelvis, while blood began to pour from the wound on my forehead, pooling on the expensive floor. Through my blurred, tear-filled vision, I looked up, begging for help. What I saw froze the last bit of warmth in my soul. My mother, Meredith, didn't rush to my side. Instead, she grabbed Chloe's arm and pulled her back, whispering frantically, "Step back, Chloe. Don't let the blood get on your designer dress." Pierce stood over me, panting, completely unbothered by the fact that his daughter was bleeding out on the floor. He quickly handed the tripod back to the stunned, horrified videographer and muttered, "She tripped. Everyone saw it. She's just being dramatic." Preston stood right beside him, casually slipping my BMW keys deep into his suit pocket, a cold, indifferent smirk on his lips. They were going to let me die right there on the floor just to protect their lie. The physical pain was overwhelming, but the emotional realization was worse. I was entirely alone in a room full of monsters who shared my blood. The childhood illusion that they might one day love me shattered completely. My tears stopped as the agony of labor tore through my body. A cold, icy fury took its place. I looked up at Preston holding my keys, and through the haze of pain, I made a silent vow to my unborn daughter. We are going to survive this night, and I will make sure the people who did this never breathe free air again. Right at that moment, through the gasps of my screams, I saw my cousin Rachel rush toward me, her eyes wide with horror. She bypassed my parents completely, pulled out her phone, and dialed my husband. "Ethan, come to the venue right now. They're killing her." The next 10 minutes felt like a chaotic blur of screaming voices and blinding lights. But then the heavy glass doors of the Austin event hall shattered inward. Ethan didn't just walk into that room. He stormed in like a literal hurricane of pure fury. Rachel's frantic call had caught him just blocks away, and he had bypassed every traffic light in downtown Austin to get to me. He wasn't alone. Behind him rushed 4 uniformed officers from the Austin Police Department and a team of paramedics pushing a heavy gurney. The moment Ethan's eyes found me lying in a pool of my own blood, holding my stomach in agonizing labor contractions, a sound came out of him that I had never heard before, a raw, guttural roar of sheer devastation. He lunged past the crowd, dropping to his knees on the bloody floor, pulling his jacket off to press it against the gushing wound on my forehead. Debra. Oh my God. Debra, look at me. Stay with me, he sobbed, his hands shaking as he kissed my sweaty, tear-stained cheeks. The paramedics instantly swarmed us, cutting off my clothes to attach monitors to my stomach to check our baby's heartbeat. Pice immediately stepped forward, putting on a fake, trembling voice, trying to control the narrative. "Son, calm down," Pierce lied smoothly, looking at the police officers. "It was a terrible accident. Debra is clumsy in her condition. She tripped over a camera wire and hit the table. We were just about to call an ambulance ourselves." Ethan stood up slowly. At 6'2", he completely towered over my father. The look in Ethan's eyes wasn't just anger, it was cold, murderous intent. He looked at Pierce, then at Meredith, who was still hiding behind Chloe, and finally at Preston, who was quietly trying to slip out of the side exit. "Shut your mouth," Ethan whispered, his voice dangerously low, vibrating through the silent, terrified ballroom. He pointed directly at the black dome of a high-definition security camera, mounted on the ceiling right above the banquet table. "This entire venue is wired for security, you psychotic piece of garbage. I own the firm that manages the data infrastructure for this hospitality group. I'm having the footage pulled right now." Pierce's face drained of all color. He staggered back, realizing his lie was dead in the water. Preston froze at the exit as 2 Austin police officers stepped into his path, hands resting heavily on their holsters before Ethan climbed into the back of the ambulance with me. He turned around and looked at my mother, father, and brother. He delivered a promise so chillingly precise that it echoed in my mind through the pain. "You didn't just break the law tonight. You tried to murder my wife and my child for a piece of metal. Hear me clearly. I will spend every single dime I own. I will hire every ruthless prosecutor in the state of Texas, and I will ensure you rot in a maximum security cell until your skin turns gray. Your lives are officially over." As the ambulance doors slammed shut and the sirens began to wail through the Austin night, I looked out the back window. The police were already reviewing the videographer's footage. I watched as handcuffs were snapped tightly around Pierce's wrists, followed quickly by Meredith and Preston, who were dragged out of the glittering venue in front of Chloe's horrified aristocratic parents. Chloe's father loudly declared the engagement null and void right there on the pavement, leaving Preston ruined and abandoned in the back of a police cruiser. The doors of the emergency room flew open, and I was rushed into an immediate high-stakes medical battle. My blood pressure was bottoming out, and the monitors showed my baby's heart rate skipping dangerously due to the trauma of the impact. The doctors didn't hesitate. Within 20 minutes of arriving, I was placed under general anesthesia for an emergency C-section. When I finally blinked my eyes open hours later in the recovery wing, the first thing I saw was Ethan sitting by my bedside, his eyes bloodshot and rimmed with dark circles. But he was smiling through his tears. He leaned down and whispered that our daughter was alive. She was tiny, weighing just under 5 pounds and hooked up to tubes in the NICU. But she was breathing on her own. She was a fighter, just like her mother. The moment I knew my baby was stable, the maternal instinct to protect turned into an absolute, cold, legal bloodlust. I didn't shed a single tear for my family. While my body healed from the major surgery, Ethan and I met with the Travis County District Attorney right in my hospital room. Pierce, Meredith, and Preston's expensive defense lawyers had been calling Ethan's office frantically, begging for a meeting to discuss a settlement or a reduction of charges to keep them out of prison. They wanted me to sign a non-prosecution affidavit, claiming it was a private family matter. I looked the district attorney dead in the eye and said, "Give them nothing. Press every single charge to the maximum limit of Texas law." We unleashed a legal onslaught that completely dismantled their existence. First, I officially pressed charges for grand theft auto against Preston for stealing my BMW. Because the vehicle's value was over $85,000, it qualified as a second-degree felony in Texas, carrying up to 20 years of prison time alone. Next, we pressed charges of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon against Pierce, amplified by the fact that he intentionally attacked a visibly pregnant woman. For Meredith, we filed charges for reckless endangerment and acting as an accomplice after the fact for trying to cover up the crime. But the criminal courts weren't enough. I wanted them to feel the absolute financial ruin they had inflicted on me my entire life. I called the landlord of the suburban Austin home they lived in. The lease was under my corporate name, and I had been quietly paying the rent for years. I pulled my funding immediately and broke the lease. While they sat in the county jail, unable to afford the massive bail Ethan's lawyers had argued for, a corporate eviction notice was slapped onto their front door. All of Preston's video games, my parents' furniture, and their clothes were legally dragged out onto the curb. I cut off the family cell phone plans, closed the credit cards they had secretly opened using my information, and froze every single financial artery that had kept them alive. They had treated me like an ATM my whole life, so I unplugged the machine and left them entirely bankrupt in the dark. 6 months later, the day of reckoning finally arrived. I refused to breathe the same air as them or let their toxic energy near my child. So, the judge allowed me to log into the Travis County District Court via a secure live video link. I sat in the comfort of my beautiful sunlit living room, rocking my healthy, thriving baby girl against my chest while Ethan sat beside me, holding my hand. On the split-screen monitor, I watched the courtroom camera pan over to the defense table. My heart didn't even skip a beat. Pierce, Meredith, and Preston were unrecognizable. The arrogant, smirking family that had stepped over my bleeding body was gone. They were gaunt, pale, wearing matching bright Orange County jumpsuits and chained at the wrists and ankles. Because I had stripped away their access to my bank account, they couldn't afford a private defense team and were stuck with an overworked public defender who looked completely checked out. When it was my turn to speak, I looked directly into the camera lens. With a calm, unwavering voice, I laid bare 28 years of financial exploitation, psychological abuse, and the absolute depravity of that night at the venue. The prosecution then played the crystal-clear security footage of Pice swinging the heavy metal tripod into my skull, followed by the video of my mother shielding Chloe's dress from my blood. The courtroom was dead silent. I watched through the screen as Meredith buried her face in her chained hands, sobbing hysterically, while Preston stared blankly at the floor, realization finally setting in that no one was coming to save him. The judge showed absolutely no leniency. Pierce was sentenced to 15 years in state prison for aggravated assault on a pregnant woman. Preston received 7 years for grand theft and conspiracy. Meredith was handed 3 years of hard probation, along with a permanent felony record, leaving her completely broke, homeless, and blacklisted from ever securing a loan or a respectable job again. I didn't wait to see them led away in chains. I simply tapped the trackpad on my laptop and closed the video link, cutting them out of my existence forever. The silence that filled my home was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. I looked out the window at my metallic blue BMW, parked safely in the driveway, and then down at my daughter sleeping peacefully in my arms. Karma didn't just find my family. I delivered it to their doorstep. I am finally safe. I am wealthy, and I am entirely free. Closing that laptop screen was the moment my life truly began. Looking back at everything I went through, I realized that blood doesn't make you family. Respect, love, and loyalty do. I spent 28 years trying to buy the affection of monsters. But karma finally leveled the playing field. I protected my daughter, secured my justice, and reclaimed my life. But standing where I am today, I have to ask you, do you think I did the right thing by putting my own parents and brother behind bars? What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Let me know in the comments below. If you learned something valuable from my story, please subscribe and hit the bell icon to join us daily.